Hello and welcome to the homestead. I need to adjust that camera a little bit. That's better. So today we're picking up on our story from Abraham to David and his mighty men. So we can learn the lessons along the way so we can aspire to be like the David and his mighty men and carry out our mission that God has given us. And we can learn from the things that they did right, the people in the Bible did right, and the things that the people in the Bible did wrong. And we can learn to not be like the modern day Philistines that just basically just sit around and do nothing and don't make improvements to their life and don't live the life God wants them to and don't make any meaningful difference to those around them. All right, the wind's moving my notes around. Let me use my clip on my flashlight to hold them in place. There we go. So last time we talked about Deborah and Barak, and we mentioned a little bit about Jael and what they did in the book of Judges. Now we're about halfway through Judges. We're going to pick up Gideon. And this is a pretty well-known, pretty popular story. And so what happened is after Deborah, Barak, and Jael, well, Deborah as judge, and then Barak as a warrior recruited by Deborah, and then Jael just stepping up and doing the right thing when she needed to. The land had peace for a while, and then those Deborah and Barak died, and the people went back into idolatry and not following God. So since they weren't following God, God did what he promised and said, if you don't want to follow me, I won't force you to. If you don't want my blessings, I won't bless you, and I'll let you receive the natural consequences of your action. My chair's sinking in back. So that's what happened, and the people were being oppressed by a bunch of the neighboring tribes, because Israel was pretty small, and they were very tribal and fairly spread out over their small population, pretty spread out, and low population density. So they were pretty easy for their neighbors to come in and pick on them. So this is what was happening. And the people were being oppressed by their neighbors, and they were to the point where most of their crops they would grow would be just come and taken by the neighboring tribes and neighboring nations. And they were hiding, they were building houses inside of caves and stuff like this. And then Gideon, he was in a winepress threshing grain. So a winepress is sunk down in the ground so you can squish the grain or squish the grapes. You can walk on the grapes and squish them. And when you willow grain, you take it, and I don't know if they had some other mechanized way of doing it back then, but you'd rub it between your hands, and the kernels of grain would fall between your hands, and the chaff gets thrown away. The outside shell gets blown away by the wind because it's really light. Well, you can't really do that in a wine press because there's no wind. Normally, you do this in a windy valley where the mountains or the hills would funnel the wind into the valley. And so Gideon is hiding to try to keep the Philistines or keep the neighboring nations from stealing his grain. And then later they would have to make bread. They'd have to pick through and hand sort out the grain and the chaff, which would suck. And so the people start crying out to God and asking God to help them and begging God to rescue them from their oppression. So Gideon hold on, let's back up. So they were being oppressed from their own because of their own sins. God left them to their own devices, and they were being oppressed by their neighbors. And we have to remember that we can't. We need God's help in order to get all the blessings that we would like, and that God promises us. God promises that He'll bless us, but we have to follow Him, and we have to do what He wants. If we choose not to follow Him, and we choose to separate ourselves from God, God will allow us to be separate from Him. It's our choice. And if we're separate from Him, the fact that the world is a broken, sinful place means that the broken and sinful nature will infiltrate us and cause us problems. And we need to humble ourselves and ask God to protect us and ask God to help us follow Him, and then also put in the effort to do what God wants in order to receive those blessings. All right, so Gideon's hiding. Cat sneaking up behind me. She's a very unstealthy cat. Aren't you, Rosie? And now she's rubbing all over the tripod. Hey. Anyway, Gideon, an angel the angel of the Lord calls to Gideon and calls him the mighty man of valor while he's hiding. And so God can see that Gideon is actually a mighty man of valor. He just needs to step up into that role and quit hiding, quit being a coward. And then Gideon asked the question: if God is with us, why is all this bad stuff happening? And then God basically says, because I'm with you, but you aren't with me. In a nutshell. And we have to remember that God sees more in us than we see in us. That God knows what we're capable of, and we need to listen to God and follow out and carry out His mission so we can fulfill what God has in store for us. We're not going to talk about it in this series, but if you look at the book of Esther has the opportunity to do something great, but she's scared. And her relative tells her, basically her adoptive father, tells her that, listen, if you do this great thing, or if you don't do this thing, you won't receive any of God's glory. But God's going to make this thing happen no matter what. God's going to save His people no matter what. God's giving you a chance to participate in His glory. So we need to recognize that God's will is going to happen no matter what, but we need to follow God so we can participate in His glory. That God's honoring us by giving us that opportunity. And give me a second here. I had to move my chair some. Felt like I was going to fall over. There, I look more centered in the screen too. Hopefully I don't sink again. Anyway. And as husbands and fathers and servant leaders, we need to try to focus on seeing the potential in people and bring out that potential. So former preacher of mine said it this way when he's talking about marriage. If a husband and wife are down here, and God's up here in the middle, and they're both striving to get to God, and they're helping each other get closer to God, because it's a triangle. As they get closer to God, they'll also get closer to each other. Now that works with your children. That works with other people that you're involved with. The cat is over by the yellow jacket nest. So this may end badly, and I might have to end my live stream more quickly if she aggravates them too much. I hate those stupid yellow jackets living in the ground. Tonight I'm going to try to get rid of them. I've been trying to get rid of them without pouring gas down there because I don't want to dump gas into the ground and contaminate the ground with that kind of toxic ick on our homestead. anyway, we got to bring out the best in people, and we got to help people get closer to God, encourage them, and lead them through example. And we have to do this same or we have to allow others to lift us up and bring us closer to God too. Uh, Proverbs says, like iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. And if you sharpen an axe or a machete or a shovel, any tool like that with a file, it's noisy. The file is hard and abrasive, and it's removing metal, but it's removing the unwanted metal to bring that to a fine edge where it can do work. And we need to surround ourselves with people, and we need to allow those people to sometimes be abrasive towards us, to remove the unwanted parts of us, to bring us make us useful. A dull axe is not very useful. A dull shovel takes so much more work. A dull machete is dangerous and doesn't do its job. A dull knife is dangerous and doesn't do its job well. We need to allow people to sharpen us, and we need to help sharpen other people so we can all be useful to God and useful to those around us. And I always pray before I start these and ask God to help me to convey something for you guys, to uplift you guys, and to convey something for myself, bring something to my attention to help me. And almost every time I do one of these live streams, there's at least one or two things I'm like, man, I really need to work on that. I need to work on being a better servant leader and helping more people helping to hone more people, and surrounding myself with people that will help hone me better. All right. Where was I? Okay, so Gideon. Oh, and I encourage you to go and read Judges 6-8, read Gideon's story. We're not going to touch on everything here. We're just going to touch on the highlighted parts that apply to the lessons we're trying to learn to live out our mission of being better fathers, husbands, and servant leaders. All right. So God is talking to Gideon, calls him a great warrior and all this stuff. There's a leaf on me. And then he tells Gideon to go and tear down his father's idol. So he goes to tear down his father's idol, but he does it at night because he's scared of his father and scared of the people around him. So even when we're scared, we should still obey God, and we should still do what is the right thing. And so Gideon's father wasn't being a good example of those who follow God, but Gideon was setting that example to his kids. He was breaking the cycle of being ungodly. And there's lots of cycles families can have. Let's say a family has at least verbal abuse in its history. You can not pass on that verbal abuse by acting like that to your kids, or emotional abuse. And you can choose to end that cycle, and by relying on God, you don't have to keep worshiping the idols of and allowing these demons of abuse into your life and passing them down to other people, passing them down to your kids. Proverbs again says you should leave an inheritance to your children's children. And that's not just talking about money. That's talking about leaving your children with what really matters, and leaving your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren with what really matters, a legacy of people who are close to God and follow God. And we should be working to remove the idols from our life, remove things that separate us from God from our lives, and set the example for our household, and remove those things that separate our families from God. We should lead by example. On the Undaunted Life podcast, I forget the name of the host of that, but he says we should be a thermometer, or a thermostat, not a thermometer. We should be setting what happens in our household. We shouldn't be just reporting on what happens in our household, going along with it. All right, so God comes to Gideon again, and this time Gideon's like, "I'm really scared. Can you give me proof that this is going to happen the way you say it's going to happen?" And he lays down a wool fleece and says, "Make it dew overnight on the fleece, but not on the ground." And that happens. In the morning, the fleece is wet, and he wrings out a bowl full of water. And Gideon's like, "I'm still scared. I still don't know if this is gonna. I don't know if this is gonna happen the way God says it's going to happen." So he says, "God, in the morning, have the fleece dry and the ground covered in dew." And that happens again. And Gideon's like, "Okay, I can do this." And we have to remember that God is patient with us, that God will show us. He may not show us in physical signs like that, but there's other ways God can show us. So God can show us through other people. God can show us through things that are happening around us. So when I was living with my parents after April passed away, my first wife, it was not good for me to be living with my parents. Let me put it that way. And I needed to find another place to live. But I didn't have a lot of money because of April's medical bills and funeral bills, and I was trying to pay those off. So what I ended up doing is, or I was praying about it. And I heard through a couple podcasts I listened to all around the same time. They all did interviews or discussions about living in RVs. And a couple of YouTube channels that I knew about but didn't really follow started showing up. The YouTube videos from those channels, like Cheap RV Living, were showing up in my feed more often. So I was praying about it, and I really felt that God was trying to say, "Hey, maybe you should live in an RV." So I was looking around for an RV to buy, and April's aunt offered me an RV, and I moved in there. God didn't show me in such a way as a fleece, but He made it evident after I was praying that I could do this. Sometimes He makes it evident like that. Sometimes He makes it evident by people around you talking, or you read the Bible and something catches your eye that you've never seen it that way before. There's all kinds of ways that God lays it on our heart. But we should have other people around us. We should surround ourselves with good, godly people that we can bounce these off of them and make sure that it is something that we are being steered in the right direction. It's not just something that happened that way, or it's some other influence. And then, speaking of that, I haven't been crossing off stuff off my to-do list and other things as fast as I've been wanting to. And for the past few days, well, more like a week and a half, 2 weeks, on a bunch of the podcasts I've listened to, they've mentioned not playing video games. And I don't play video games that much, but there's other things that I do like that are time wasting. So I need to quit playing video games altogether and quit doing other time wasting things altogether until I get back on track of getting things crossed off my to-do list. Which is hard. It's hard to admit that we've been doing the wrong thing and that we need to be doing the right thing. And I've been praying a lot about God teaching me to be a better husband and father and servant leader. And now I feel like this prompting and this has been coming into my life to not play video games, to not waste so much time on stuff. I've even made a video myself on quit doing that and starting to step up, and I need to do more of that. I don't, like I said, I don't watch TV. I don't play a lot of video games. I don't waste a lot of time on my phone. I do waste, I don't waste a lot of time on my phone compared to most people, but I do waste a lot of time on my phone compared to what I should be doing. And there's a lot of stuff around the homestead that I need to get off my butt and get finished. Two things this episode, so far, this video, that, two lessons for me. I hope people watching this are getting something out of it. So Gideon does this fleece thing to ask God to give him confidence. So God tells Gideon to go recruit an army. So Gideon goes around to the different tribes and he collects 32,000. Well, God's like, hey, 32,000, that's a pretty good sized army. If you go into battle with 32,000 men, you might take credit, and the people might give you credit, and the people might take credit for them winning the battle. I need to prove that I won the battle, like that God wins the battle. He doesn't want an army of 32,000. So he starts cutting the army down. He says, anybody, he goes back to Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy, back to the law, and says, anybody that is ineligible to serve according to the law, go home. So that cuts the army down. Then he has some other, if anybody's scared, go home. And that cuts the army down smaller. And he does a few things to cut the army down smaller. God's like, it's still too big. So he takes his whole army to down to the river to drink. And God says, anybody who bends down and crawls down on all fours and drinks straight out of the river, to send them home. Anybody who scoops up the water and drinks it out of their hand, that they should stay. Because the people that do that, they're maintaining their situational awareness. They're prepared in case they get attacked or anything like that. They're paying attention. So they're the best of the best. And we need to work on this kind of situational awareness in our lives and not get distracted and get our head into things. Not walk around with two earbuds in at Walmart looking at our phones, watching YouTube videos while we walk around Walmart. And stuff like that. We need to pay attention to the stuff around us. That's the one problem I have with regular life straws. You have to get down into the water to drink, and you can't see what's going on around you. And you may not be able to get... There's other issues about getting in, and you can't take the water with you and stuff like that with life straws. I do have some life straw-like water filters, but they're like the Sawyer and can screw on to other water bottles, and they have a tube you can use with them too. I really like those. But that's aside. I just wanted that part of this channel is about preparedness, so I wanted to bring that preparedness topic up because it's related to the story. So anyway, they're down to 300. And God takes them into battle, and what they do is Gideon tells them to wait. And, Gideon tells them they're all in camp. God tells Gideon to sneak over to the outskirts of the Midianite camp. And he does, and he hears a couple of them talking about dreams they've been having. And one of them gives an interpretation of the dream that means that God is going to fight for Israel and they're going to lose. So Gideon goes back to his camp all happy about that, gathers his forces, and then they wait till after nightfall. And what they do is each one carries a torch that's not lit and a jar. I'm not sure how they light them as quickly as they do without lighters. That might be an interesting topic to study. Anyway, Gideon's troops all at the same time, smash their jars, light their torches, and they yell something for God and for Gideon or something like that. I don't remember. I just read this story earlier today. I don't remember that detail. I think it's for God and for Gideon. Maybe it's for Israel and for Gideon. And they get ready to attack. Well, since they're up in the hills surrounding the Midianite camp, the Midianites hear all this noise and see all these torches, and it's loud and confusing, and they think that there's more men than there are. They think because of the echoes that there's more men. They think that there's 300 of them with lit torches. Normally, you wouldn't have your entire army light torches because while holding a torch, you can't use your sword and shield. So they think there's a lot more than 300 up there. So they panic and flee. Some of them end up killing each other in the panic. And Gideon has victory without actually fighting. That God leads them into such a situation that the Midianites are defeated by God's hand. Now, the Midianites do run away, and Gideon does chase them and ends up capturing the kings and killing the kings. And there's a whole story in there. Like I said, I encourage you to go back and read Judges 7 and 8 and get the whole story. We're not going to go to the details there. It's an interesting little part of the story, but not relevant to this discussion. So, we need to teach our children and teach by example to have faith and to follow in God, but to be the resilient kind of people that can step up and do what God wants. So we created a chore chart. Everybody in the family created their own chore chart. I had Sarah and the kids look at mine. Me and Sarah looked at the kids. I helped Sarah with hers. And all this week, I am setting the example for the chore chart. If the kids don't get theirs done, everything on their chore chart done, that's fine. They're not in trouble unless it's something major. Like I asked one of them to do something today, and they're asleep instead of doing what they're supposed to be doing. Why are they asleep in the middle of the day? Anyway, there's a couple of things on there I missed. So the other day, I did sprints to make up for it. And then there's another day I didn't do everything. So I have a bunch of sit-ups I need to do to make up for that. And then also another day, and I know we're not very far into this, I might have bitten off more than I could chew on my chore chart. I got burpees to do. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with having to do extra work. And I'm setting the example for the rest of the family. And yes, when the rest of the family fails, they're going to have to do this physical work. The rest of the punishments we've been doing with the kids, taking away electronics, we can't ground them because they don't leave their house. Like I said, one of them, they're actually right now, they both went to bed in the middle of the day. When I'm done with this, I'm going to get them both up. Anyway, we got, where was I? But I'm setting the example, and holding myself accountable, and I want them to see that I'm doing these things. And then that I'm not perfect, but I'm striving to be perfect. I'm striving to be better. I'm striving to get in better shape. I'm striving to be a better father, a better husband. I'm striving to be a better servant leader to the communities I'm in. And that way I can encourage them to do it without being a hypocrite. And I'm trying to show them I'm praying more. I'm trying to show them more doing Bible studies. And after dinner, after dinner every day, we've been watching a little bit of different videos, 15, 20 minutes of things that are uplifting, encouraging, whether they be Bible stuff, some dog training stuff, so we can get all on the same page of dog training. We're watching Joel Salatin's documentary that Angel Studio did. Those kind of things. So Gideon has victory, and I already did that part. All right, so now Gideon is all puffed up. God warned him that he's going to take credit, and then Gideon if there's too many men. And even with just 300 men, Gideon still takes credit. And Israel asked him to be their king, and he says no at first. But he names his son Abimelech, which means my father is king. So he's acting like, oh, no, I'm doing the right thing. I don't want to be king. God should be our king, when really he's trying to become king. He even asked the people in the battle, his soldiers in the war, to give him a tribute of gold from their plunder. And he uses that to create an ephah, or an ephod, something like that. It's a gold thing priest wear. I don't know much detail about it. I just know it's a gold thing priest wear. And he's not, nobody but the priest, high priest is supposed to have one. So he goes and makes himself one. And then he sets it up, and he starts to worship it. And so does the people around him. And he leads the people to start worshiping this. His job was to bring people out of idolatry, and he gets snared in it. We need to, as husbands and fathers, we need to make sure we're not prideful. Like I just said about the church chart, we need to show that we screw up and that we're trying, and we need to show how we're trying to better ourselves. And when we have victories, or somebody around us has victories, we should celebrate those victories. But also we should keep in mind that we have those victories because God grants us those victories. And we should be careful not to fall victim to our own hype. All right. So then Gideon leads Israel into peace and is their judge for 40 years until he dies, and then they fall back into sin. That's the cycle that happens over and over again. And like I've said before, the strong men make, and this is not my phrase, strong men make good times. Good times make weak men. Weak men make hard times. Hard times make strong men. We need to ensure that we're passing on, not making our lives of our children really hard to the point where it's abuse or neglect or anything like that. But we need to make the lives of our children hard enough that they become good men. So I haven't talked to Daniel or the 20-year-old or Sarah, my wife, about this yet. But so today I was running some errands, going to Goodwill, and this car was stopped with its hood up alongside the road. So I stopped to see if they needed help. It was just a few miles from the house. She needed some help. I came back, got some tools, checked some things. She said they just changed the lower radiator hose, or upper radiator hose. I checked all that. Figured out that the problem was that it wasn't bled. The coolant system wasn't bled of air. There was nothing I could do about that, but her dad came to follow her so they could try to limp it home to where they could bleed it. But she looked like she was in her early 20s, and I was able to help her, and her dad was really grateful that I was there to help her. Now, if my oldest would have learned to drive, was stepping up and running errands for the household, and was working with me and learning to use tools and how to fix things. Now, granted, his biological father did not teach him much of that, and his biological father died at 16. So until I met him, he didn't have that influence in his life and that ability to learn things. But he could be learning this now. If he would have done all that stuff, he could have helped her. You know, if he would have made himself in the position and been the kind of man that was capable of helping her, he could have stopped, helped her, and said, "Oh, well, you're going to limp your car home." They were going north. I was going north towards Goodwill. So Daniel would have been going north. Be like, "Hey, I'm heading in the same general direction as you. Here's my number. Call me if you need help." And it would have been a great opportunity for Daniel to meet a woman, to show that he's capable of taking care of her and giving her number. It may not have gone anywhere. It may have gone somewhere, but because he won't step up and be that kind of person, and I'm not doing enough to force him to step up and be that kind of person. That opportunity wasn't available for him. And I need to fix that and help him. I'm not going to force him to be a different kind of man than who he's growing into be, but he needs to be the kind of man that God wants him to be, and the kind of man that would attract a good, godly woman. Anyway, so we covered Gideon, his success, his failures, and a bunch of lessons we can learn, and stuff I can learn, and stuff I need to change in my life along the way. And so, if you like homesteading or preparedness, we do a lot of those videos around here. But if you want to live out God's mission, that's our other three pillars: preparedness, homesteading, and living out God's mission. Those are the three pillars that prepare to prosper. If you want help in those areas, if you want to be able to discuss those areas, because we all fail. I mentioned throughout this places that I'm failing in my life. If you want to have other people, at least online, that can help you sharpen yourself and be able to do what you need to do. I just heard a loud noise in the front yard. Thomas is out there, so good thing I'm wrapping this up. But if you want to help people, surround yourself with people that are trying to live out God's mission. They're trying to be better husbands, fathers, and servant leaders. That are trying to be better at being prepared to take care of their family and those around them. That are trying to homestead so they can take care of the people around them. If you want to be around those kind of people and want to learn from each other, not just learn from me, learn from each other, and I can learn from you guys too, join me on Telegram. It's rt.me/prepare to prosper, or search Telegram for prepare to prosper, or I'm going to put it down in the description. I forgot. I wrote the call to action and didn't put the link in there. So join me there so we can have a good discussion. Next time we're going to talk about Samson and his royal screw up, or his calling, his screw ups, his final redemption, and what we can learn from that. Samson's a hard story for me. We'll get on all that next week. So I hope you join me again next week. Same channel, Prepare to Prosper, 3 o'clock. Remember, we prepare today so we can prosper tomorrow.